love a hate triangle. Jake and Simon, hi there, how are you? I'm going to talk about Trainspotting by Irvine Welsh. This is a book that Jake actually recommended to me. I think that's why I originally read it. It was published in 1993. It's supposedly a novel, but it's basically a series of sort of dislocated short stories told about the same group of junkies from various different points of view, and it doesn't really have a plot so much. Things don't really move forward, which I think was a very conscious effort on part of the author in that very little progresses. The only major plot development throughout the whole novel is one of the characters, who isn't a junkie at the beginning of the novel, is at the end. I was actually quite sort of dubious about reading Trainspotting, mainly because I'd seen that famous quote from it that they use in the film trailer about, you know, choose life, choose a mortgage. I'd seen that sort of splashed around Tumblr in the same sort of way that Fight Club quotes are used, in that fight the establishment, cliched teenage Tumblr kind of way. You know, the same Tumblr that has lots of photos of Starbucks cups and attractive naked men has quotes from Trainspotting, which kind of brings down the credentials a bit. But I did actually really enjoy Fight Club, which is another book which suffers from the same problem, so I gave it a go. It was pretty much what I expected, really. First, most immediately noticeable thing about the book is that it's written in Scots, which basically means it's written in a Scottish accent, so for someone like Simon, who has English as a second language, it would be quite difficult to read. I promised Simon that if I did review Trainspotting, I would attempt to do a Scottish accent. I'm beginning to regret that promise, but I shall read out the first paragraph and try. Jake's Scottish accent is a lot better than mine, so he can probably like outdo me in another video. The sweat was lashing off a sick boy, he was trembling. I was just sitting there focusing on the telly, trying not to notice the cunt. He was bringing me down. I tried to keep my attention on the Jean-Claude Van Damme video. That was awful. I apologise to any Scottish people who just watched that. Anyway, the thing about it being written in Scots is I didn't really see why it was necessary. I suppose the reasoning behind it is that it makes it more authentic, more immediate, and just sort of more Scottish, because it is very focused on the fact that it's Scottish. It's very much about Scotland and about Edinburgh, which I suppose would explain the use of Scots, and I assume that for a Scottish person reading it, it's pretty easy to read. But for me, it just, with my posh English accent, it just sort of slowed down the reader. It's very much an angry book. It's an angry and critical book, but it's one of those angry critical books that is not at all constructive. It criticises the way the system is run, and it criticises the people who manipulate the system for their own benefit. Most of the main characters, it's only mentioned briefly, but their income is basically through benefit fraud. Whilst the main characters describe themselves as sort of the scum of the earth and hate themselves, you can feel that Irvine Welsh's anger is kind of directed to everyone else. The best example of this is there's a bit where a Scottish waitress is working in a pub and a group of English men come in and are quite rude to her, and she takes her revenge in a very unhygienic way. And I just felt as though that's what Irvine Welsh wanted to do to me for being English. I don't know. That might just be me automatically assuming the victim perspective. It was also an incredibly violent and gross and grotesque book. There are moments, especially when the characters are going through withdrawal symptoms and all that, of just severe grossness. Not only is there, you know, a lot of excrement and violence, there's also a lot of very dubious moral happenings, especially around sex. Most of the sex in the book is incredibly questionable, like sex with a dead brother's pregnant wife, or sex with an underage girl, that kind of thing. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. That is because, although it's not my kind of book, and Jake keeps on telling me to read other books by him, books called, I think they're called like Porno and Filth, don't really, sorry Jake, probably won't be reading those books, but I can see the merit in these books being written. Obviously I'm anti-literary censorship, and I think it's very good that this sort of stuff is being produced, but I don't particularly enjoy reading it, and I don't really like reading these kind of books that are sort of angry without a solution, without a definite object of that anger and that blame. It just feels like a really, I hate to say fruitless exercise, but that's kind of how I feel. Simon, it was really interesting hearing what you thought about the Hunger Games. it also made me realise how little I analyse and think about films when I watch them, because that thing you got really angry about, the shaky camera, the handheld camera or something, literally hadn't noticed that at all when I watched the film. Like, just, I can't even remember that happening. And yeah, although I mean I should have known. I watched The Woman in Black with you and you were like telling me which shots they should have used instead, which I didn't think anyone watched films like that until I met you. Yeah, that's all I have to say for now. Hopefully Jake will make the next video, or else he will have lots of catching up to do in terms of video. Bye!